Hello guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to share my experiences working with resin art. Before I show you the process, please subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Some of you may know that I am a realist artist, but this lockdown was long. I felt drained of creativity, motivation, and inspiration to produce anything. As a result, I began to experiment with other mediums in my studio, hoping to revive my feeling of joy. For some reason, it was difficult to find excitement in my regular portrait painting and colored pencil drawing. So the idea was to learn resin art and fluid art painting techniques from scratch to combine them with my realist art in a new way. Here I'd like to share what I learned doing resin art. All resins are different in consistency and application. You have to try several different brands to figure out what works for you and your projects. For example, liquid diamonds is high quality resin that runs like water. It's both good and bad for resin artists. It's good because you need much less resin to cover the surface. It also generates less heat as a result of thin application. It's not great because it can run over the edge really badly. The entire batch of mixed resin can potentially run off the surface through a single small cavity present between the edge and the tape. Some resins have doming capabilities like little windows or case resin. This is great to hold the edge and not so good cost-wise because you need to apply a lot more resin to cover the surface completely, especially if you work in subsequent layers. Thicker resins tend to roll off the previous resin layer unless you have enough to cover the entire surface or you've done some sanding. And that's why it depends what kind of resin art project you do. Each resin works great for specific projects and may be terrible for others. I've done small jewelry pieces, small and large resin paintings, as well as some geode art and large geode pieces. In my experiences, little windows mixes great and gives very few, if any, bubbles working small. It's crystal clear, easy to mix and dome, and it is non-toxic, so you don't breathe in toxic fumes. I didn't like it that much working large, however, because it likes to be poured all at once and left untouched. Otherwise, it could leave strange patterns in the resin. Other resins like Kies resin or liquid diamonds or stone coat resin give me a chance to spread the resin around the panel and to manipulate it some to cover the surface without leaving any patterns in it. Consider the scale of your project. As a result, the scale of your project or the amount of mixed resin you need requires experience that no one can give you in a tutorial. Only by mixing the resins yourself and applying them in your varied projects, you learn what works and what doesn't, and how much mixed resin you need for a specific art piece. One advice I can give you is to start small. Resin is expensive to waste it, especially if you buy art resins. But most importantly, working small cuts on your frustrations because a lot of things can go wrong working big. Mixing not enough resin, falling dust, broken edge, uneven application, bubbles, and so much more. By working small, you minimize your frustration on so many potentially big problems. Consider working time. Working time varies greatly in resins. Quick coat resin can start setting up in 10 minutes, while Key's resin can have 40 minutes working time. If you don't add any powders or paint to the mix, the working time is long enough to spread it around, torch, level it out, and torch again. In my experience, what I found cuts on working time greatly are high humidity levels, higher room temperature, and the amount of added pigments mixed into the resins. This becomes crucial to learn when you do large resin art pieces, because resins can set up almost instantly having acrylic paint or mica powder mixed into them. They'll set up so quickly you won't be able to take them out of your cup. In general, it's best to add just a little bit of pigment to resin for it to set up properly. Also, if you make geode art, you want some of your edges to blend more, while others need to look hard. Working time and layering greatly affects what kind of edge you'll get between the colors. Resins have varied mixing instructions in terms of volume and time needed to mix both parts. You must follow mixing ratios written in the instructions for every new resin you use. Some resins have 2:1 mixing ratios and others have 1:1 ratio. Mixing time varies too. And it's very important not to cut on mixing time. Spend as much time as necessary mixing the two parts together, and only after that add pigments, glitter, powder into it and mix it some more. For example, it takes about 4 minutes to mix both parts of KS resin. Why is it important? Well, you need to do it right to prevent having soft spots, cracking, or uneven application. If you use plastic cups that don't have precise measurements written on them, pick identical cups and measure the level you want with the ruler. For example, I can measure and mark 1 inch from the cup's bottom. I mark both cups with a Sharpie, pour equal parts of hardener and resin into those cups, leveling resin out to that 1 inch mark. And then I take the third cup to combine these two together. If it's 2:1 ratio, you can't measure 2 inches versus 1 inch because the cup widens. So I use the same 1 inch measurement and just measure it twice. Oh, those pesky bubbles happen naturally because you mix part A with part B and the air gets trapped in the chemical process of mixing the two parts. Resins are very different in the amount of bubbles they produce. Little Windows resin has very few bubbles that tend to disappear on their own, and when you let it rest first and then blow some air over the surface, those bubbles disappear. I never torched this resin and it came out perfectly even and crystal clear. Liquid diamonds is not super bubbly, but it does have some bubbles. And so as a result, whenever you use resins, you must get a small torch to work with most, if not all, resins, because bubbles stay in cured resin for good and they just screw up the overall appearance of the finished piece. Some resins are very bubbly and there is no way around it but using the butane torch. Picking and working with the culinary torch is tricky. I think that the construction of any handheld torch is about the same, despite their difference in price and even size. Based on the reviews I've read, all of them have similar flaws, not working properly from time to time. What you can do, you can go on Amazon and read one-star reviews to understand common problems associated with the handheld torch. The amount of flame changes without changing the knob, or it doesn't want to charge butane one day and does charge it just fine the next day. These are the problems that I had with it. But anyways, I suggest that you buy it, work with it, but be extra careful. The torch can burn the masking tape, which happened several times in my experience. It can also burn parts of your artwork where you have no resin, or it could burn anything around your art, or even some parts of cured resin in the previous layer. That's why I always use the lowest setting possible, and I hold it far enough from the surface not to burn it. I move my hand around the piece evenly without concentrating on any particular area. When the resin is bubbly, you can see how the bubbles disappear instantly, torching them. Usually, I repeat the process twice. I have this torch, but I don't think it's better or worse than any other. It's just the one that I got. I also buy butane can at a local hardware store where the price is the cheapest. Watch what tape you use to hold canvas or panel edge to protect it from spills or dirt or paint. I find that cheap or generic masking tapes don't work the same way as Scotch masking tape does. Generic ones can stick to the surface for good. It's very difficult to remove it when the resin cures. You must apply heat, torching it to take it off. And when resin runs over and sticks to the tape, it often doesn't come off 100%. You need to be real careful. Also, cheap masking tape doesn't hold the edge well and may let the resin flow over the edge or under the tape. I had this happen too many times. Scotch masking tape stays in place, it removes easily and rarely needs a torch. Whenever you work with resins, your space must be super clean and dust-free. Every tiny particle can land on the surface of curing resin to destroy the beauty of the shiny surface. You can't undo it, and it ruins the glass-like appearance of the piece if something sits on it permanently. It looks terrible when the dust settles right in the center of your artwork. To get rid of dust falling over your resin art, you need to find a cover for the art piece beforehand, so you can put it over the piece while it cures. And this is when the scale of your art can kill you, because the larger the piece, the more difficult it gets to apply resin perfectly. This includes mixing enough resin to cover the surface, to keep it dust-free, to mix just the right amount of resin to do colors, to pop all the bubbles, to keep the edges clean, and so much more. Your clean cover must be large enough to protect the resin piece. And I use plastic box covers, tin cans, and even Ziploc about 15 by 20 weather shield boxes. All resins yellow with time. Some have inhibitors to slow the yellowing process down. and this kind of resin costs a lot more. I've seen my resin projects yellow even when they were not exposed to the light at all. So I'm not sure that not exposing it to the light fixes the situation. That's why I just buy more expensive brands to make sure that my pieces last longer. But I think yellowing could be a problem if you design your art piece that's supposed to be pure white or has cool color scheme and eventually becomes yellowish. But I find that when the surface is colored, slightly yellowed resin doesn't really change anything visually because this color change is almost unnoticeable on colored surfaces. Cheap resins yellow very quickly and don't level out easily. I really like KS Resin Liquid Art Ultra UV Epoxy. It has UV light inhibitors in them to yellow much slower with time. Work on sturdy surfaces like wood or canvas panels. Regular canvases bend, cave in, and twist. Thus, they are not great for resin application in general. And molds are not made the same too. Cheap ones give resins matte look, and you have to either polish your resin piece or just throw it out. Silicone molds designed specifically for art projects keep resin pieces very shiny when you take them out of the mold, and you don't need to do anything extra to make them crystal clear and shiny. So whenever you shop for molds, read reviews first. I often go to Facebook groups to see discussions or to ask a question about resin. I love my jewelry molds from Little Windows store. Because I am a follower of classical painting, I don't come from making craft projects, although there are so many creative resin art ideas I want to explore. I just wanted to make my drawings look more like paintings under glass, with a touch of magic in them. I haven't seen anyone doing this. So that's the reason why I began doing resin art. If you decide to try to do something similar, you must protect your drawing with a varnish first. If you don't, it will change the color and tones of your art. The drawing even may disappear. When you apply mixed resin, it generates heat and melts some wax in colored pencil. So you must prevent it from a complete meltdown. I apply several coats of synthetic spray varnish over my drawings. I do it outdoors, and then I can apply resins over the surface. So my favorite is Grumbacher matte final fixative for pastel, charcoal, and pencil. This gives me a very nice and even surface, and I just love this fixative. I think it's the best. Don't use cheap fixatives because they can make your drawings look cloudy. Also, there is no need to varnish pieces made of resin from scratch. I think it's useful to varnish acrylic pieces before applying resin over the acrylic painting. So there is no interaction between the art and the resin. What if something goes wrong during pouring or resin setup? You could have uneven surface or lots of dust set up on the piece, or the resin didn't mix properly and produced soft spots or cracks. Wait for it to cure 100%. Just look at the instructions, how long it takes to cure. Sometimes it's just 24 hours, and other times it could be, 4 days. So wait for it to cure, and then carefully wet sand the surface with 800 grit sandpaper. It will give you a better grip when you apply your next layer. I used 800 grit sandpaper to even out the surface twice on one piece. When you sand it, the resin becomes cloudy and it's just nerve-wracking, but it becomes glossy once you pour a top layer of resin over it. I regret I didn't buy the sander earlier to sand my canvases. This is a fantastic tool to have in the studio. I used Black & Decker sander. After that, you're ready to repour a resin. Make sure your piece is level before repouring. I end up pouring on my table first, but then I take the panel to the floor to cure overnight. And high quality resins level out well. In conclusion, doing resin art is fun, but it also can be very frustrating and expensive process to figure everything out on your own. Please start working small, use high quality resins, learn how to mix and apply colored resins, as well as how to use the torch. And happy painting! Thanks for tuning in. If you love this video, share it on social networks and find me on Instagram and Facebook. Take care. Bye bye.